Hi again then guys, and so we've got another Special Projects replica build for you today, and this particular replica is actually a much simpler one. It's very easy to achieve, and it's almost more of an update to the car, to be honest, rather than a full complete overhaul as we would usually have to do. And basically, as you'll have seen from the title, this is to turn your Ferrari California into a representation, or about as close as we can get, to the Ferrari California T, which is of course the turbocharged, more powerful, faster and visually updated version of the California. Now obviously we can't do that many updates to the car visually. You've got the optional chin splitter, which I have fitted, and of course you cannot turbocharge the car, which is a shame because that would be pretty much the best way of representing that model. But we are running the specs of the actual California T. So first of all we'll go over to the visual tuning garage, which is a relatively simple look that I've gone for on the car, just a couple of minor details. Then we'll go over to the tuning garage for the mechanical setup, which in the case of this car is of course the most important thing, and then we'll finally take it out to the track to see what it can do. For the visual look on this particular model, as I said, I have fitted the optional chin splitter. Now that doesn't necessarily make it look any more like the California T, but it just makes a slight change to make it look a bit more sporty and to update the front end a little bit. So you don't technically have to do that, that's just something I've opted to do. As far as the rims, which are, I'd say, probably more effective at making it look a bit more like the California, I've gone for the slightly larger rims. And the particular rims that I've gone for are these Rays Volk Trinity 5 rims, which are actually not too far off the actual rims of the California T, or one of the rim options for it. And I've painted them a slightly different version of silver. But you don't have to go for those rims, of course. You could go for any colour, you could go for black, silver, white, whatever. And likewise with the body, I've painted it white, but being a production replica, you can of course go for pretty much any colour. I've opted for white because it allows you to see the details of the car a bit more, but you could go for blue, red, black, yellow, whatever colour you want. So now let's go over to the mechanical tuning garage for the setup of the car. Now this is a production based build, and as I've said before in my special projects series, I like to try and make these as PP relevant as possible, so I was really happy that this car does round off actually perfectly to 550 PP with the actual specs of the California T. Now it's a production spec build, so I've gone for sports softs rather than racing tyres. I've left the brakes stock because again it's more of a production model and you don't want the car to feel too good in effect. For the suspension I've gone for 90 on the front ride height and 100 on the rear. The reason why I've gone slightly higher on the rear is because this car, as a lot of Italian exotics do, naturally sit with the back end lower to the ground, which gives it kind of a dumb look, I think. I don't really like that look of having the nose in the air. So you don't have to correct that if you don't want to, but that's just something that I don't like. As far as the springs, I've just rounded it off to 550 and 725. The dampers and anti-roll to 3. We've got a little bit of camber, 0.5 front and rear, and that's mainly for the look. We've got neutral toe. We'll come back to the gearbox in just a second. As with most of my production-based replicas, we've left the clutch even, and prop shaft stock. And for the diff, we've got initial torque on 20 just to stiffen up the steering a little bit, acceleration on 50, and braking on 30. As far as the power, we are running the actual power of the real car, 553 horsepower. We've got the sports computer, sports exhaust, sports manifold, cat, and then reduce power down to 99.7%. And as far as the weight, we've got stage 1 weight loss package, window weight reduction, and a 185 kilo ballast, which we've put all the way to the front of the car to make it a little bit more tail happy, a bit more fun around corners, and also to bring us up to the real weight of 1625 kilos. Finally, for the gearbox, we are running the exact gear ratios of the real California T. So you want an auto setting of 230, then for the individual gears 3.4, 2190, 1630, 1280, 1090, 860 and 720, with a final drive of 4440. So that's it overall for the mechanical setup and replica of the California T. Now let's finally take it out to the track to see if it performs well. Overall, I would say the handling is actually possibly a little bit too good, ironically enough, on this particular car, because the real California T should probably be a little bit more tail happy technically, but at least it does mean that if you want to use this as a competition spec machine, you can certainly do so. It handles itself extremely well even on sports tyres. There's almost no wheel spin at all. It hardly even gets its tail out, to be honest, so if you are looking for a little bit more of a drift happy machine out of this car, you may want to play around with the diff a little bit to encourage the tail to get out a little bit more. But overall, it's very fun to drive, and the California is one of those cars which for quite a while I didn't really care about. I didn't particularly dislike it, but I'm not a huge Ferrari fan anyway, and most of their cars just don't really do it for me. But the California has kind of grown on me over time. It's quite a unique looking car. I completely understand why some still don't like it. It is certainly a very oddball looking car, especially from the back. But it has kind of a long distance GT, almost a Ferrari version of an Aston Martin kind of look to it. And for those of you who do use this replica for the California to turn it into a California T, obviously I hope you find it fun and competitive, and I'll see you guys next time. But as always, thanks for watching.